Hello and welcome to Sustainability Forward, the show where we explore the ideas, technologies, and the leadership choices shaping a more sustainable future and the transition to it. I'm your host, Wrishi. With me is my co-host, Carmine. How are you, Carmine?
Ciao, Rishi. All good. Nice to be back.
Ciao. Okay, today we are going to talk about something that's moving incredibly fast. At least that's the perception right now. And that is the intersection of AI, cloud, and sustainability. Every week, there seems to be a new announcement, whether it is about new tools, new claims, or new promises. But for sustainability leaders, the real question is quite simple. And it is, what is actually changing on the ground? What is hype? And how do we scale what actually is working? And to unpack that, we have an exciting guest who's experienced multiple sides of this equation. Carmine, let's get into the introduction of our guest for today.
Sure. So today we have Carlos Silva Willson with us. He's a global technology partnership leader at Microsoft Middle East, whose career spans from General Electric, Baker Hughes in the US and Europe, Amazon UK, and now in Middle East, rapidly evolving innovation landscape. Carlos is originally from Venezuela. He studied economics as an undergraduate in the US and then completed an executive MBA at the University of Edinburgh. Carlos brings a unique lens on how cloud and AI can drive sustainability, economic opportunity, and social impact, drawing from deep international experience and a passion for empowering diverse communities. So, Carlos, hola, welcome to the show.
Ciao, Carmine. Ciao, Wrishi. Thank you so much for having me. Big fan of the work you're doing on this podcast.
Thank you, Carlos. Welcome. Now, Carlos, before we get into the details of this topic, tell us a little bit, when you look at what's happening right now with AI and cloud, particularly in the area of sustainability, what's the sort of big shift you think most leaders are underestimating or struggling with at the moment?
There is, by the way, this is a super exciting topic, and I want to give you as well some context as to why it excites me and why I decided to make a bit of a shift. Right, it's been quite a journey, as you described, Carmine, from helping drilling contractors and operators in the North Sea to being up there in the cloud, as we say. So I've been able to see both sides of the equation. I mean, one of the parallels I try to draw to understand a bit more the shift and the transformational time we're going through is the massive investments going into infrastructure, right? And we in humanity, I think we've been here before, right? If you think about the UK in 1840 with the railroad infrastructure building, there was what they used to call the railway mania, right? There was massive amount of infrastructure to build, and there was a lot of question marks around whether that was going to be a success or not. And of course, a lot of companies went under, and it created a bit of a bubble. But in the long term, it benefited massively, right? This for me, as I think about kind of the pulse in the ground, this is kind of the question mark, right? The question mark is, is there too much or too little infrastructure for what AI is going to be, right? Is it a bubble or not? Is it a hype or not? And in all honesty, I don't think anyone has the answer. But what we do know and what we're seeing is the rapid transformation that companies are seeing, at least the ones that adopt and the countries that adopt AI. Microsoft with the AI economy studies, they have been releasing what we call the diffusion report, and the diffusion report clearly stipulates and shows countries that are fast forward on adoption of AI technologies, and the results of those countries that are fast forward on adoption and their citizens is obviously massive amounts of productivities that we're seeing at both the corporate level but also at country level. So I think it's a very important aspect to grasp, understand, and also see it as an opportunity versus a threat, which I'm sure it will come up in the discussion that's essentially the big elephant in the room, right? The role of data centers and infrastructure on the sustainability side, both as an ally, but also potentially as an enemy.
Interesting, very interesting.
And let's pause a second about this potential dilemma, and let's go back more on your personal journey. So you mentioned you're coming from the industry, from oil and gas. You went to GE, then Baker Hughes. What are you working on now? And compared to that, what's your view on this energy transition and decarbonization?
This is a really good segue to give you guys a bit of background. So one of the reasons I joined the AWS after spending 10 plus years in GE and Baker was the pivotal role I really saw on hyperscalers and data center companies having in the sustainability space, both as being on the demand side of energy. Today, hyperscalers dominate the leaderboard when it comes to renewable power purchase agreements, but also by enabling companies to achieve their climate target through data center infrastructure, right? These being compute, networking, storage capacity needed to run advanced workloads and really solve those harder problems while providing scalability and reliability. I also had the chance to see firsthand the leading role that cloud technologies was playing in the sustainability space during my time in Baker Hughes. There was the newly created innovation offer development team, and we really worked directly with hyperscalers on building tech-driven value proposition in the decarbonization space, especially on hard-to-abate sectors. So this really allowed me to appreciate how many answers to the climate challenge could be influenced by cloud technologies, right? Um, I think another important aspect that we'll talk that I think a bit more in the podcast is the bilateral relationship that is being developed by hyperscalers and energy companies. You know, today hyperscalers are becoming some of the main customers of their own energy customers, right? Back to the PPA discussion. So this has really opened exciting opportunities to collaborate in different ways. And I think that the funny part is that leaving Baker Hughes and joining AWS back in November 2021 and during COVID times, the real talk of the town, if you guys remember, and maybe this is when
Hmm.
you launched the podcast, was sustainability everywhere. Integrated energy companies in Europe were shifting rapidly strategies and capital allocation into a greener position. But fast forward today, with the official launch, of course, of ChatGPT in November 2022, the discussion quickly shifted into AI, and it has only intensified today, and it will continue that way, right? So I think this is where we cross that dilemma that you, Rishi, and Camille were kind of anticipating, which is data center infrastructure being seen both as an ally for solving climate change, but also GHG greenhouse gas emission offender, right? And this is what I think it's the bigger question at the level that you guys are proposing.
Yeah. No, no, exactly. And it's helpful context to understand the world from where you came to your current setting. And just to explore that a little bit, I wanted to ask you about something that's more practical. So, in your view today, how is cloud and AI actually enabling kind of faster climate innovation, decarbonization? Of course, in energy companies, there's a lot of modeling going on, but beyond these big buzzwords, do you see specific examples that are helping the day-to-day activities?
This is a fascinating topic. Thank you, Rishi. I mean, one thing that I'm really focused on is really finding those business use cases, right? Because we really believe that this is where we will be able to move the needle and find those answers. So when it comes to technology-driven AI transformation, the way at least in Microsoft we interpret this with our customers is, on the opportunity side, you're really touching on a couple of buckets, right? These are aligned to reinventing customer engagement, reshaping business processes, enriching employee experience. And the most fascinating for me is on the bending the curve of innovation, to your point, right? So if we stay on the innovation side of things for a second, which is probably the most relevant for our discussion, There are amazing examples out there around how the cloud is powering sustainable innovation at speed and scale, and this really illustrates the potential of cloud when we focus on sustainability more broadly. Um, some examples that I really like, and some are close to home here in the UAE. There is one around Emirates Global Aluminium, right? One of the largest aluminium producers. This is the largest export of the UAE after oil and gas, where the organization is really focusing on um, what we know is a very energy intensive process of converting, of course, alumina to aluminum without getting very technical. This is very important, of course, for automotive, aerospace, and other industries. With the cloud today, EGA has established an AI-driven quality monitoring system that can inspect 100% of all the anodes in real time, which was a process that before was being done manually and only covering 2% of the supply. Yeah. So for me, this example brings the message home of how much cloud technologies can help companies improve quality control and efficiency. Another one that I find really interesting was the work that Microsoft did with scientists recently at Pacific Northwest National Lab to apply AI in materials discovery. AI was used to find a new battery material, one that needs less lithium, in a matter of weeks. And normally, this kind of breakthrough takes years of trials and error in lab research, right? So this AI-driven battery discovery is crucial for clean energy. So some of these examples for me really illustrate the power of cloud technologies. One last one that I find really interesting because I'm a consumer myself. It's a Pure Harvest on the agriculture side. Obviously in the UAE it's very hard to grow things um, due to the land, but using AI and machine learning and IoT, this company today is improving food security by farming high quality, affordable produce. So today I'm able to buy strawberries from this hydroponic farm, and this is leveraging essentially cloud technologies to achieve the right conditions for those producers to harvest, right? So these are examples that I think bring the point close to home, and I'm sure there is many more out there that people would resonate with.
Yeah. No, it's very pertinent, very exciting as well. I read yesterday, or maybe the day before, that that Chat GPT 5.2 or GPT 5.2, the model has achieved some kind of breakthrough recently with in theoretical physics, right? Essentially co-writing new breakthroughs with academicians and experts. One side question, Carlos, that I had for you was, give us a little bit of the feel of the Middle East when it comes to AI and cloud. From here in Europe, we hear stories about how many countries in the Middle East are sponsoring regional initiatives to make the region a powerhouse. So give us a little bit of context of how it feels to be based there and actually being involved in this field.
Absolutely, and I will probably focus a bit more in the UAE since this is where majority of the work is happening, at least on my side. But also some of the exciting upcoming projects in Saudi, which we know is an economy that has lots of potential. But look, the UAE for me, it's an amazing example. If I draw some parallels as well, or compare with my home country, Venezuela. Venezuela has 3 times more the oil and gas reserves of the UAE, but we are definitely very far away in terms of execution. The UAE has grasped extremely well the opportunity in front when it comes to AI. In fact, the UAE National Strategy for AI 2031 states a clear statement, which is the UAE wants to become the world's most prepared country for artificial intelligence. And we can see this on the news by funding, very important projects that we've seen, and consortiums between NVIDIA, OpenAI, and different announcements that have been made. But also on the ground, on the ground, the UAE is really walking the talk, and a couple of things are important to share so people grasp a bit of the trajectories. The UAE today has appointed a UAE Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence. They expect to unlock 91 billion AI-driven extra growth for the country. And they have really prioritized a couple of sectors: resources, energy, logistics, transport, hospitality, healthcare, and cybersecurity. The national AI strategy today, from AI ready to AI leader by 2031, aligns very well as well with the country's overall mission of being the best country in the world, right? So what we see is a real kind of multifaceted approach on collaboration that has really dictated the pace for other countries to see it as an example.
Yes.
And then if you go one level down, sorry, on the citizen piece, this is where the diffusion report is actually showing that on adoption of AI technologies, UAE it's one of the leading countries today. The last point, Rishi, that I think is really important to mention is that the countries that we see leading, and UAE of course being one of them, what I see is the multifaceted approach that is being driven in country for this sort of innovation, right? And there's a couple of elements I would like to call out that are really important. On one side, the cross-industry adoption is super important, and this of course is with customers at the core. The second one for me is human capital, people first, the upskilling strategies that the country is driving with the help of hyperscalers and different players. It's second to none. Partnerships, of course, this continues to be a very important point, with engineering center in the UAE being established, 1 million UAE learners on AI by 2027, the skilling initiatives, the G42 and Microsoft partnership. These are some of the examples. Technology at the core, again, is really important. The announcement recently of NVIDIA shipping chips over to the UAE is another important point. And last one is this government direction, with here it's exemplary. And of course, companies like us are working backwards from a clear vision. So I hope this gives you a bit of an idea of what it feels to be here. Just lastly, touching a bit on Saudi. It was publicly announced recently that there's going to be data center infrastructure established by the end of the year as well. So there's a lot of excitement about what that means for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And these are great opportunities, I think, for other countries to also learn from what's happening. If you think about the UAE, 57 years ago, it was not even a country, and the speed at which they have moved, and knowing that today they are ahead of a lot of countries in this AI race, it's a great example and inspiration.
Yes, indeed it is.
Carlos, we know that working on the challenge of climate change and sustainability, this is not something that can be solved probably by incremental addition. It's probably a system change, and we touched multiple times in the podcast around it. So partnership, ecosystems becomes critical. Based on your experience, what does good look like when different companies collaborate on a climate solution?
This is a very important point, Carmine, especially because touching back on the multifaceted approach, partnerships are key here, not only from the deployment of capital, technology, but also on the use case piece. One of the things that at my level I face very often is proving the value, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the use cases that today contain a big opportunity for transformational change, um, the way, of course, companies are evaluating these opportunities tends to be quite traditional, right? So you have to really, bring a different set of stakeholders to the table, and proving the value proposition that these use cases could provide in return, right? So when it comes to this, you really need a vision that is driven from top, and this is not only the company, but also from the different kind of players on the on the equation to your point, and that includes obviously the regulatory frameworks in place. That includes obviously the capital allocation from the company. That includes the vision from the leadership, and that includes as well a strong partner that can deliver. I think we've seen very recently on a lot of statistics that were going around about the lack of ROI of a lot of projects that are not implemented properly, are not assessed properly, data foundations not being in place. So there is of course a big need to come to the table with the right players around the right problem, and really looking at it from a problem and not from a company perspective, right? This is what I'm seeing on the ground. This is where I get most involved with my job in partners, specifically on the system integration piece. And we spend a lot of time more on the ideation phase, just to make sure that we have minimum viable products that are really bringing all those stakeholders together with confidence around the execution and the deployment of a specific project linked to a business problem.
Interesting. Carlos, we obviously talked about the exciting things which are likely to be needle movers in this space. But as AI scales and data center load tends to increase, and every now and then we hear about a new announcement, like you mentioned in the case of Saudi, it also brings us to this aspect of, are we trying to solve one problem and in the process creating a big one, right? In other words, the risks associated with this big growth. So we hear frequently about the high energy consumption. We hear about the high land grab in one sense. And we also hear about the significant consumption of water for cooling these data centers, right? Can you talk a little bit about these aspects and what you are seeing on the ground?
Absolutely. So look, this is a very important point of discussion. If you think about the AI economy, just to put things into perspective, by 2030 is expected to reach 4 trillion, right? You know, this is slightly below what India's economy is today. So just to give you an idea on the magnitude, right? So if we look then on the other side, on the greenhouse gas emissions that today data centers are driving, it's around the 0.5% to 3.5, right? But this is expected to reach 8% by 2030, right? The reason for that is because we have more and more power hungry data centers as we think about solving more complex problems. AI workloads, we're doing a lot of training, inferencing, at the end of the day driving logical conclusions through compute. So this is very energy intensive, as you mentioned, both on the cooling and heating side. I mean, another important point into perspective, just to set the scene, data centers in terms of percentage of global energy demand today is 1.5 to 3%, and it's going to be 2x by 2030. So it's definitely a point that we cannot avoid, and we need to have the debate around. What gives me hope is that if you think about the architecture of some of these data centers and the advanced innovation that we're seeing day in, day out on chips, and we're seeing as well on the incorporation of renewable energy combined with baseload in some of these data centers that are closer and closer to power sources. This for me gives me a lot of hope around the way at which data center infrastructure is innovating by answering the question of being more efficient, being more reliable, and being cleaner, right? I think this is, if you look at the kind of statements of most of the hyperscalers today by 2030 around sustainability, it's really a strong commitment towards being carbon neutral, if not negative, right? So of course, this brings a different discussion around how that's measured, and the whole debate around how companies are proving this. But for me, the direction of travel is pretty clear, and the companies that we see leading the kind of data center landscape are really progressing fast and super focused on driving that energy demand down.
Carlos, let's try to close the circle here with a final question. So we started with your journey. Let's finish also on a question on a people side. So let's look at the evolving skill set for climate tech professional. Uh, as we discuss in cloud, AI technologies become more foundational. So what's your take on that? And what kind of advice can you give to young professional entering this space, especially those who are coming from a transition as you did?
It's a very good point. I'll start with the last one on the advice. I think one phrase that is very present on my day to day. It's AI will replace the people that that don't get close to AI, don't understand it, and don't use it. So my advice is, take advantage of the opportunity, because this is a really pivotal moment in our society, in our world, in our countries, in our workplace as well. So it presents opportunities, and we need to see it from that lens, because I think it really holds a lot of the answers we're looking for. When it comes to the skill set, specifically for climate tech professionals, we're seeing a blending of disciplines, if you will. Traditionally, you had environmental scientists, you have engineers, you had policy experts, and separately, you had software developers and data scientists, right? Increasingly, we're seeing more and more that the world needs people who can do both, really, or at least work in multidisciplinary teams effectively. For example, a data analyst today might need to understand atmospheric science and be able to write Python code and run AI models. An engineer working on renewable energy might benefit from knowing cloud computing to manage IoT sensors data from solar farms as well. So the key skill set for me is tech fluency and domain expertise. If you're coming from the tech side, I would say get curious about climate and energy systems, learn the basics of power grids, carbon accounting, agriculture. And if you're coming from the environmental side, it pays to gain data and AI skills, even through online courses or machine learning or cloud platforms. There's a lot of available, free, accessible material out there that I would recommend people have a look. And with your support, guys, I'm happy to also share some links that
Yeah.
Microsoft is also providing for people to understand not only the pace of change, the diffusion report, but also to upskill themselves in these technologies.
Yeah, that'd be good. We will reference those in the show notes.
And by the way, as you were talking, I was having in mind something I was reading early this morning. So yes, probably in our view of the world, we think these are kind of technology that are widely used. But if I look at it from an helicopter view, probably between 80 and 90% of the world population still is not close to AI,
Yeah.
not even having some accounts.
Wow.
So there is sometimes we forget that in the many daily activities that can be improved or touched by these new technologies, and today they are very far from it.
Yeah, we went from energy growth to the topic of energy access as a global community, and already, Carmine, based on what you're saying, we are going from AI growth to AI access, which might be the next wave. Carlos, thank you. This has been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you very much, guys. Pleasure, and looking forward to continue the discussion from different angles, as we are all very important players on this topic.
Yes, absolutely. What I'm taking away from this conversation, Carmine, is well, one, AI and cloud are very powerful, especially when they're tied to some real world outcomes or operational decisions and not just reporting. And two, I think I also heard Carlos talking about partnerships. As you mentioned, this is not a problem to be solved by one organization or one entity, and therefore, multi-stakeholder approach is needed. Any takeaways, Carmine, you had on this?
And I think the ecosystem matters. I think Carlos describes what's happening, for example, in the Emirates and how they reach that kind of level of speed, also because of the right, probably, ecosystem that is in place.
Indeed, that's another key aspect. So if you enjoyed this episode of Sustainability Forward, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, share it with someone working at the intersection of sustainability and technology, and join the conversation with us on LinkedIn or one of the podcast platforms on which we are present. We'd love to hear what you're seeing in terms of real progress and what questions you are dealing with. Again, Carlos, thank you for joining us. Carmine, thank you to you as well. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Sustainability Forward.